My name is Inga Numadottir, and I'm solution architect, work for Citrus, and I have been around this product for over 20 years now. I started with the original Accepta that some of you might not even know about, but we're going to go through some of the year-end and closing tasks because I've experienced from a lot of customers that this is taking way too long. And the agenda for today is I'm first going to go through some of the tasks or the mandatory tasks that are related to month-end processing and the year-end processing before we move over to D365 to take a look at what is in D365 that could help me make this process more efficient. I call it period end processing, sometimes month-end processing. It all depends on how you run your company. Where are your, what's your period? Is it at month end or is it some other definition that you have for doing your reporting and reconciliation? Now in D365, we have all of the processes are module specific. So you have the sub-ledgers that are tax, bank, fixed exits, assets, and so on. Sorry, and then so you need to finalize all of the sub-ledger before you can then get the financial department can then get to closing up the ledger. Now, what this is to give you kind of an idea of what I consider the mandatory checklist for your month end. One of the most important tasks in the beginning is to set the access levels correctly, because setting the access level so that only the group that is going to be working with the month-end process and closing up, reconciling, and so on has access to all the modules. Because, and this is really important, because otherwise you might end up with someone in invoicing, doing some transactions or posting some transactions that are in the past month, and so you have to do your work all over again. So it can save a lot of time just making sure that all of your access is correct. Other thing I want to point out is setting the period on hold. This is really important. The period should only be set on hold and never on closing it permanently, as it's called now in D365. So make sure it's only on hold, and then at a later point you can take a look at it again and say, okay, now it's time to put it permanently, close it. That's typically first after you have had your shareholder meeting and everything is good to go and been accepted, and the and if you want to and even after that meeting, there could be a situation if the companies get sold. I've had experience with that, where they actually need to go back and change the period to 18 months instead of a year. And so they had to reopen some of the periods in the old year. So that's really important to be kind of aware of that. Put it just on hold until you're absolutely certain you can close. So another task, other tasks that are related to the month end is kind of optional tasks, but it all depends on what type of company you're running. So if you're using foreign exchange rate, you need to run your exchange rate update. You need to do your adjustments. And if you have multiple companies, you would also need to run your intercompany postings to make sure that all of the transactions that have gone on between the companies have been posted. Now, at the year-end processing, of course, you have to still do your monthly month-end process, and then if there are any kind of reports that are you need to complete that are like quarterly, those would also need to be done. And then make sure that you create your fiscal year. The new fiscal year has to be created immediately so people can start processing in the new year in the current period. Another thing that is really important to notice about D365 is that even though it says closing the fiscal year, even though you run that periodic closing of fiscal year, you're not really closing the year. is basically moving and giving you the beginning balances of the year for the next year. So you can run that as many times as you want to. So I always tell my customers to run it in the beginning of the year, because then you automatically have all of your beginning balances, and then just run it again whenever you think you've made the adjustment and you're close to be done with all your adjustments. And of course, if you have any posting layers that you're using, like you have, if you have any tax that needs to be in a separate layer, or if there are any other kind of postings like the closing sheet, if you're using the closing sheet, that gives you an extra period. So what that does is it will give you an extra period. So if you run, for example, December, if that's the last month of your fiscal year, if you run for December, you can use the closing sheet to do some adjustment posting instead of using so it doesn't reflect in your December transactions. Now for the yearly processing, you also have some things that you might run. For example, for US, it's really important to finish the 1099 reporting, and most of other countries have something called VAT reporting that needs to be done as well. But one of the things I really want to point out is the review of the number sequences. And I say reset number sequences if it's required, but it's really, really important that you every year, at least once a year, you should review your number sequences, because I've seen customers running into that they can't run the invoicing of your purchase order because they don't have enough number. There's no numbers left. So what you want to do is to review all the number sequences, make sure that you have enough for next year, or have someone check for you that there is enough for next year. And it is a good idea. Some of my customers actually put the year in front of some of them to make sure that they know exactly what we're talking about. This is both the processing of in AP and in AR, and then also in journals. So you have some work to do there. But in D365, we had the feature is global, so you can actually pull out all of the number sequences and then put it into a spreadsheet and check your things, and then just fix the ones that you need to. And remember the internal number sequences as well. So now we have all of these tasks that needs to be done at the end of the month, end of the year. But the task that I mentioned in the beginning, the month year end, like reconciling AP and finalize that, actually some of these tasks might actually include multiple processes. So multiple tasks, subtasks that need to be executed. It could be invoicing, doing your payment processing, and so on. So this is just to show you an example of, this is a small number of tasks, an example of what needs to be done before you can do the ledger reconciliation. So all the processing needs to be behind before the financial department can get to their task of reconciling. All right, so is there any help in D365 for this? And yes, there is. There is something called financial period closed. I have not seen it used a lot, so that's why I wanted to point this out to you, that there is actually a lot of help. And this feature will help you structure what I've shown you, the tasks that you have related to the month end, and also define all the dependencies. So it will help you and structure how you're going to approach your month end or your period end closing. It contains two main things that are included in this feature, in this module. It's the configuration, which is the biggest part of this, because that's where you're going to define all of your how you're going to do things, how your dependencies, and so on. And then you have the other part, which is a workspace where you can run your month end, and that you then have control and overview over all the tasks that needs to be done related to the month end. We want to move into to D365 because I want to show you this feature. So we'll go through a kind of how the workspace does and how to use it. And then I'll walk you through how you can easily configure these things. How do you complete tasks? How do I know that I actually done the task? And then kind of adding new monthly, yearly tasks and templates, and how to use these things. And now we will open up D365 that I have here. And I want to start in the workspace area, because I want to show you kind of how this works and how to use the feature in an efficient way. And then afterwards, we'll go over to looking at how was this configured, and how does this appear here in this workspace. So right here, I have my financial period close, and I can have as many as you have ever defined. So I have one called July, which is the for 2020, and I can see that it's only one company. I want to show you the another one that I have, which includes a lot of companies that are here. So it can be defined for one company that is really specific, or it can be defined for a group of companies and so on. If we take a look at the tile section here, for this particular company, we're not doing very well, because it has got 35 past due tasks, not very good. And today I actually have 3 remaining tasks, and most of them are blocked, or all of them are blocked actually. And then I have, so there are 38 remaining tasks. And I can see here, if I look over here, that I have 38 out of 39 tasks are still remaining. Now, if I go in and take a look at one of these remaining tasks that I should be doing today. So I have 3 tasks. And if I go and take a look at this, this task list, I can see that it's a balance sheet in general ledger that it should be taken care of. But I'm not going to be able to complete it. So I want to complete this task, but I cannot do that. And it says to me that it's dependent on a different task. So I want to take a look at what is this task. And I can just hover over the status. The status here indicates that this task is actually blocked. And it's blocked by myself or the same person that should be doing this. So Phyllis should really have been out and stopping the period before she tried to complete this task. So that's kind of how this works. You can see who's responsible here. And if you notice when I hover over these things, that all of these are actually links. And if I want to, what this does for you is that if it actually helps you to get to the area of D365 where you can actually finalize this work. So you can actually go in, and if you click on this balance sheet here. So the error that I got, that it didn't have any action associated with it, it means that it doesn't have any, it doesn't take me anywhere. It just means that it's a task. So it's actually good that you saw this error. It's a task that you need to do. So you need to run whatever income statement you need to run for this. But if I want to, for example, look at the area here that's called accounts payable, I can see post pending vendor invoices is a task that I should be resolving. So I want to go into that area, and it will take me directly into the area of vendor invoices. And I do not have any that needs to be posted. So this one is actually empty. And what this does for you, the fact that you have these links here, is that you can now, instead of going through and finding out where in AX do I need to go, like someone that is trying to both close the inventory and close the AP, where do I need to go in D365 to actually close these tasks? Now I have one place where I can go, and it will actually take me to the place, to the correct place in AX. So all the tiles will indicate for you how, where are you with the different things, what tasks are available for you. Over here you have all the lists of tasks and what status these tasks have. And you can also filter on what you want to see. You can do this. It all depends on who you are, where you want to go here. So you can also have a status by area, and that will give you kind of indication of how are people doing with their finalizing the tasks if you want to have an overview of this. And I can see that general lecture is finished 12, and that's it, 12.5% complete. And if I want to see it by a person, so I can see that Cassie is the only one that has been working on these tasks, and the other ones have not started yet. And then the task list here will actually give you an overview of all of the tasks that are pending here. And you can see here that these are overdue. So the exclamation mark indicates that it's overdue. And then I can go in and follow this one here, for example, and it will take me directly. It's a different type of thing. So some of them will take you to a list page where you need to take some actions, and others take you directly into a certain area where you need to take an action. Like this about stopping the period would take you over to where you can actually stop the period. And if I go to the period I'm working in, which is July, I can go in here, and this is the company that I'm working with, and I can go in and edit this, and then just put this on hold. As I pointed out, you don't use the permanent close. That would be, you just put the period on hold, and then you're kind of done with this task. So these tasks have been that have been created. I can then go in and view all the completed tasks. So up here you have capability of both showing the completed task, and you can go in and see when was it closed. So this one was closed today, completed today. And if I hide this again, at any time. So if I have something special about this period, or I want to change this, I can go in and edit this. I can go in and set a new dependency here. I can go in and add a new task, remove them, look at what attachments are associated with the template, and also what is a specific attachment to this particular task. And this will just kind of give you a list that you can actually take action on directly. Now this looks really complicated because I have access to everything. I'll show you afterwards in the configuration how you can, how this list will be limited for other people. So only the ones that really are like managing these things should have access to all of these. Now the last part of this workspace is the links. You can of course personalize this workspace just like anything else. And but here we've put up all financial period closed tasks, which will just show you this list that I have here. I have the configuration that we will go in and look at closer. And then we have ledger, which could be very relevant to see what account structures are there and so on. And then fiscal calendars, which are very relevant here. So in this, so it's really easy to kind of take action on this. It will take you straight into where you need to be to finalize these tasks, and you can change anything in here up here in the menu if you need to. Configuration. So now we've seen the workspace and how this works. Now, how was this workspace built up? What's the data behind it? You will get into this financial period close configuration, and you start from the bottom. Now, it's really important to point out that before you start this, you should really kind of have a list of what are these things that I need to do before going in here. So if my closing roles are listed here, and this is not does not have to be necessarily the modules in D365. This is actually how have you divided the tasks. So if you have roles that say, I have this special person that she does all the closing. Then it's not accounts payable, or it's not an accounting manager, not or anything in that direction. It would actually be just an accountant that is closing. So let's create a new one here. I'm just adding a new closing role, and it doesn't really do anything. You'll see afterwards when what happens with this. Now here you would have employees associated with the tasks. So let's create a new one here, and I should actually, so I have myself here actually, and I'm the purchasing manager. So I'm going to select this. And for this person, you need to define if she should see all tasks and statuses. So what I was telling you about before was that normally you wouldn't have everybody have access to every task, but we had that because I'm in as an admin role. But I can have that this person should only see the assigned tasks. Now, just defining the employee doesn't do anything. You also have to choose what are the roles that you are going to add here. So what's the closing role that this person has? And we just went in and created a new one here, so we can use that. And then you want to choose this role that she has. What companies does this apply to? So what companies can she work with? And we want to put in the US entertainment. So now I kind of have this person that can only see her own tasks, and she only has the role for this company. So she's not allowed to do closing for any other companies. All right. So let's move over to the task area. In the task area, you're defining what are the tasks that needs to be solved. So if you saw on the task list, we could actually see that we had tasks that needed to be executed, and these are also defined by you. So it doesn't have to be related to D365. It's more like your terms. What do your employees recognize when they see it? And we're just gonna call this AP invoicing. So this is the same as the roles. It's just like it's a text that I'm defining here. Nothing's happening. Now the calendar, you can have different types of calendars. It's mainly about how many days of the week or which days of the weeks are you allowed to work on the closing. And in this case, and there could be, let's just say we only work on the closing 4 days, because after the 4 days I want to be able to work on my tasks that are over these things. So if it's like 4 day schedule, the start date would be, let's just take 2021, and then we have the end date will be just the end of that year. That would be very typical to have this fit with your kind of yearly, your fiscal year. So if it's not the calendar year, then you would typically, like you have here for 19 to 21, you can have any kind of calendars here. It all depends on how your company is run and how you run a company. So now I have all the kind of the basics for the calendar, the task, who can work on this, and what roles can I apply. So now we get to the magic part. This is a template, and if you've used templates in D365, you know kind of what this is. So this is a template that my tasks for each month are going to be built on. So if I have, like I have here, I have a month end task, and I have some other tasks that I've created along the road. So you can either add a new template and then start building all your tasks here, or you can say I want to copy a template and then what's the new template going to be. So a smart way of doing this would be to build up your month-end tasks, all the basic tasks, especially if you have like a lot of companies like this has around the world. So if you have certain areas, let's say you have the Eastern countries, and then you have Europe, you would want these countries to be closed. These are probably different people, different teams that are going to be doing the closing. But then you build up your initial template, and then you can just copy the template to the next company, and you can say, okay, and then these are some additional tasks that would be for each company. So, and also then you would use a naming convention that would tell you which area is this or which companies are this and so on. So you could actually see that when you're going to use it. So let's just try to add a new one here. Let's just call this month and EU. If I don't have it already. No. So on this one here, so I'm starting with a completely empty template. A lot of work, yeah. I might have hundreds of tasks here, but I wanted to show you how this all comes together. So let's put in one here. So if I take my areas, I have the accounts payable. My task here, I want to call, let's just call it invoicing. And the date that is due after period end. So let's say that I want my month end period is the 31st of January. When in February do you want this task to be done? So let's say that I want it to be done on the 2nd of February. So I will put in 2 here. So the period will then say, okay, 2 days after the month end, the last day of the previous period, you have to be done with this task. So that's what will decide the due date for the task. Now the closing role, we're going to take the new roles that I defined here, and then the company is going to be, let's see if I can get this drop down here. The company is going to be USMF. Now, if you have put some restrictions down at the resource level or in the closing roles, you would get an error if you haven't if these things don't go together. Now, here's where the magic happened, because this is where you define where is this going to take me. So if I click on this task, where is it going to take me? And in this case, because I want you to be invoicing all the purchase orders that have been received, I would pick all purchase orders, and then because this is the person that's going to be executing this task will know that they need to go in and invoice everything that they have received invoices for, if it has been received. If that's the condition for doing invoicing in your company. It all depends. So here you can then set the dependency. So is this task dependent on anything else? Or are you going to, is this task just, it can be done at any time after the month end? Or are there any attachments? Are there any documentation that you need to attach to this? And then the area that you are selecting here is like, what's the main area around this? For filtering purposes. This is just for filtering purposes. This is how you build up the list that we were looking at before in the workspace. And now I have all the things here. I have my template that I can use and so on. So now I can start building up my schedule. I can do this every month. And let's just create one here that's called January 2020. And if you want, this is very limited naming convention, but the naming convention can help you to tell you what areas it's for and all these kind of things. So think about it when you start naming these things. January closing, and the period that I'm going to be closing is defined here. This would be 2020, and then I have 01/31 2020. And now the template I'm going to be using, I want to use this new template that I just created. And the calendar that I'm going to be using is going to be my new calendar. I'm only working on closing for 4 days. Very nice. So, and I only have one company, and look at that. I only have one company because I defined only one company in this template. So, so I'm gonna create. Now I have a new January 2020 is here. So it's for USMF, and it's called. Yeah, I know it doesn't add up because yeah, the US company is not new. I know, but that's fine. So now I've done all the configuration, and now I can go back to my financial closing workspace. We're going to go into period close. Here we have a workspace, and of course you can also, I mean, you know how to get to your workspaces. So now I want to take a look at this new one, and what's happened here is that I now have my January financial close period, and look at this, there's only one task, and it's USMF, and that kind of shows me that that what I did, it works, and that's how you define it. Now let's go back to the slides. I want to point out a couple of things around the implementation of this. How do you implement this feature in D365? Well, the first thing I would say is try to go in. If you have a test environment, that would be brilliant, because you would have then access to kind of go and play with it. And there's actually a feature that can help you create some of the data. That's called data management. It's really smart, because then you can actually play around with these things and try to do some of the things yourself. But then the biggest task would be to gather all the periodic tasks from the departments. So some companies have it really structured in spreadsheet, and they know exactly where they're at and have a checklist and so on. Other companies that I've seen have notes, and especially if there's a big change turnaround with employees, this can be a real struggle. And I've seen customers that have, they use more than half of the month to try to close the last period. But I also have seen customers that have, that say, you know, I'm going to use only 5 days. And they've kind of made everything so effective that they can actually do it in 5 days, but they also work around the clock. So they're working a lot. But anyway, the most important thing is to gather these tasks. And the second most important thing is to draw up your dependencies, because there's really nothing that will kind of give you an overview or anything other than you're going to draw it yourself and say, these tasks need to be finished before this task is done, and so on and so on and so on. So make sure that you have a good overview of this. And also, what are you going to call this? What areas are you going to have? How many month-end templates do you need based on what areas you're going to be closing together and so on. And then you create the tasks per month. And like I said, you can copy the template. So make sure that you create the basic template, and then you create the ones for the other areas, And then you will create a separate one for the year-end closing, and if you have quarterly. So make sure you have the templates that you need. And then, and at the end, configure anything extra that you want to have as a template. Now, we've been through this feature, and it really will help you structure the approach to the period closing. And it also will help you, like I said before, it will help you take you to the area where you need to do the things, where you need to kind of do the task, and then it can take you back and you can go to the next task and work on these. But there is actually a lot of other features, standard features in D365 that will help you. And they will help you both reducing the daily processing time, but it will also prevent a lot of the errors that you're dealing with at the end of a month. One of them, and I just want to name like 3-4 of them, because this is a subject for another 40 minutes to show you these kind of things. So I will just name a couple of them. The account structure and advanced rules, we use them really, really effectively. And this will prevent errors a lot. The same with the journals. I have an example down here. If you have a journal that is used for multiple companies, then and if one company only should have access to department 100 to 220, then define that and say, you can also do that through the account structure, by the way, but using these kind of features that are already there. The intercompany journals, if you have transactions between the companies, make sure that you use the intercompany journals effectively, and that instead of going into one company and do the journals, and then in the other company you can actually do all of this at once. Same with periodic journal. They are really, the periodic journal are brilliant to use for prepaid rent and so on. And there's an automation around the allocation if you want to allocate cost, and that can also be allocated between companies. So across companies you can create allocation rules that you run, and that will then generate your journals every month instead of you trying to create the journals yourself. And the same with the accrual schemes. So these were just kind of the few things I wanted to. There are more, and like I said, it's a subject for another class. Well, thank you very much for listening, and I hope this helps you get started with using some of the good features in AX to make it more efficient. And I also want to thank Dynamics Cons for arranging this. Great job with arranging all of this, and a lot of work. So thank you very much. And if you need to send any questions, or if you have anything, feel free to email me. You have my email on this slide as well. Thank you very much.